Joining us now is Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Let's welcome Frank Zaccanelli.
Live from the Real News Studios in Dallas, Texas, welcome to the To Be Frank Show. Your host, Frank Zaccanelli, has been in the world of domestic and international business and professional sports for 40 years. And as a former minority owner, president, and general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, he's been asked to comment on current events in the national news for most of his professional career. But what he and many others are really looking for is a place to find just the facts. Welcome to the To Be Frank Show.
Hello, live from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the To Be Frank Show. I'm Frank Zaccanelli, your host, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. We've got a real exciting show today, and we've got a real exciting, actually very knowledgeable guest. His name is Dr. Gary Lacefield. He's the president and senior consultant of the Risk Mitigation Group. Dr. Lacefield is also a senior civil rights analyst. He has appeared on 60 Minutes, CBS Evening News, NPR, Fox and CNN, just to name a few. So we're really happy about having Dr. Lacefield here with us today, and we'll get to him after the monologue. So I hope you guys will enjoy the interview. Been an exciting week again, the news cycle. This is just an unbelievable time to be in the news business, which is now the To Be Frank Show. Every day there are new things and unbelievable things that actually happen, and you try to pick and choose what you really think is the crux of what the viewership might be the most interested in. And so we've got a 5-segment monologue today that I think covers the gamut as it relates to the news and where we stand in today's world, some 85, 88 days, whatever the hell it is, outside of a presidential election that will be the most contentious presidential election in the history of the United States. I've said over and over on the show that if you think it's bad now, wait another week, wait another 2 weeks, because it's just beginning in terms of the mudslinging and the accusations. And, you know, when would we ever have thought that we'd have a presidential election where people are questioning the mental capability of each candidate? Where would we ever have come up with this? You know, I've said I'll host the mental exam, for both of them. You know, the To Be Frank Show could be center stage on holding the mental exam. You know, we'll hold up cows and elephants and all this stuff that these mental exams hold. But seriously, when would we have ever thought that this is where we would get to in our politics in the United States? It's unbelievable. And I talk about this canyon-wide divide every single show. And that's part of what Dr. Lacefield is going to help me try to analyze today. But the first segment of our monologue, gaslighting. It's a term that, when I was growing up in the neighborhood, you'd never say, hey, quit gaslighting. No one would have even known what that is. Here's the problem. A lot of people still don't know what it is, but they know the effect. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation. Gaslighting. Psychological manipulation. Okay? Roll the first segment of the tape.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. On Memorial Day weekend of this year, a man called George Floyd died in police custody in Minneapolis. And America has not been the same since. It may never be the same. In the months following that incident, Floyd's death has been used to justify a nationwide convulsion of violence, destruction, looting, in some cases killing. And all of that in addition to unprecedented levels of political upheaval, the wholesale reordering of our most basic institutions. Floyd's death changed everything. It was a pivot point in American history. No matter what your side you're on, that's very clear at this point. So with all of that in mind, the significance of the event in mind, it's striking how little we really know months later about how exactly George Floyd died. The official storyline is clear. It couldn't be clearer. Established news organizations state as a matter of factual certainty that Floyd was, in the words of NBC News and so many others, quote, murdered by a Minneapolis police officer.
Okay, that was Tucker Carlson. We'll get to him in a minute. He asked on national television, one of the top cable shows in the country, people are asking how George Floyd died. That's insane. Everybody watched it 1,000 times. He died because a guy put his knee on his neck when he was saying he couldn't breathe, and the guy died on the pavement of the Minneapolis streets. I mean, is there any question about how the man died? Okay? But this is all part of what I want to try to cover today, this gaslighting. Now, Tucker Carlson is one of the top television, cable journalists. His show has gigantic ratings. I don't have anything against Tucker Carlson. I actually knew a guy that knew him that said he was a nice guy. He and I politically pretty much don't align up on anything, as I don't with Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon. But Tucker Carlson, you know, has a very, very watched show. People follow him. They watch him. When you listen to the intro on this, it's all about this new footage now that has come to the forefront that quote unquote shows now, in at least Tucker Carlson's mind and some of the people at Fox News's mind, the justification for quote unquote, oh, now we really know how he died. We know how he died. All you got to do is watch the tape. Okay? And this officer and his cohorts, they're going to end up going to jail. That's how he died. Okay? And it's all about, well, you know, he had fentanyl in his system and he had this in his system. Okay, so let's go and kill everybody who's on drugs. Let's kill them. And let's now, you know, when we're done with that, let's go into the bars. And anybody who's over inebriated, let's kill them too. Let's just take them out. I mean, you know, we can justify it because, quote unquote, you know, this is what they were doing. And there's some terrible stuff out there about George Floyd and his life. There's some terrible stuff out there about people that, you know, have picked on the fact that, you know, he didn't have, quote, the model life, whatever the hell that is, okay? But he had some problems with the law. He had some problems. Okay. So now just, okay, we're going to justify the fact that cops killed him on the Minneapolis, Minnesota streets right in front of everybody, right on camera. So we're going to justify that. So this gaslighting thing that is kind of almost a millennial term, again, my generation didn't even know what the hell that was, is this manipulation about how you present the news. And everybody does it. These people are paid enormous amounts of money, these news anchors, to spew this stuff. And they do it. And I think ideology-wise, they believe it. Okay? Because it'd be pretty hard to fake this stuff. But we don't know. Now we finally know how George Floyd died. He died because a guy had a knee on his neck. I mean, it's as obvious as, quite frankly, the nose on your face. Okay? Roll the second part of the clip.
For you tonight. Yesterday, the English newspaper Daily Mail published never-before-seen body cam footage of George Floyd's arrest in Minneapolis. Now, by itself, the video proves nothing. Videos never do prove anything conclusively. But this one does suggest quite a bit. The footage begins with police officers confronting Floyd in his car, and from the start, it is clear this is not a typical law enforcement interaction. The officers ask Floyd to get out of the vehicle. Floyd refuses. Minutes later, police pull Floyd from his car and handcuff him. Here's a clip of what happens next.
Oh, ouchie,
What,
man.
are you on something right now?
No, nothing.
You act erratic.
Man,
Let's go.
Bad, man.
Let's go.
God, man.
Are you on something right now? There's a reason the police officer asked that. It seems obvious that Floyd is in some kind of physical distress in the video, even before police manhandle him. And in fact, a later report showed that Floyd had a number of narcotics in his system, including more than enough fentanyl to die of an overdose. According to the autopsy, Floyd's blood contained 11 nanograms per milliliter of fentanyl. The report then notes this, quote, Signs associated with fentanyl toxicity include severe respiratory depression, seizures, hypertension, coma, and death. In fatalities from fentanyl, blood concentrations are variable and have been reported as low as 3 nanograms per milliliter. One of the best-known symptoms of fentanyl overdose, by the way, is shortness of breath. In the video, Floyd complains that he is having trouble breathing, famously, but he says that long before the police officer kneels on his neck. At one point, an officer remarks that Floyd has foam coming out of his mouth. Floyd is clearly struggling to walk. When police finally get him to the squad car, Floyd refuses to get inside. He says he's claustrophobic. Officers struggle to get him into the vehicle. Over to the vehicle, Floyd begins to scream. This goes on for about 10 minutes. Here's a clip of it.
Hands on those down, man. Please, man. Please don't do that. Take a seat. I'm going in. No, you're not. You gotta go in. Take a seat. Grab a seat, man. Man, y'all don't believe me. Take a seat. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not that kind of guy, man. Take a seat. No, I'm a dieter. Take a seat. I'm a die, man. You get in the car. I'm in the front. Please. No, you're not getting in the front. I got the bullets. Get in the car. Okay, man. Okay. I'm not a bad guy, man. Get in the car. I'm not a bad guy. Oh, man. Please, officer. Please. Sit. Please. Take a seat. Please, man. Please. No. Take a seat. I can't choke. I can't breathe, officer. Please.
Now, there's so many points here, I don't really even know where to start. Okay? I mean, Tucker Carlson basically is playing this clip and he's saying all this stuff about fentanyl, I think trying to make a case that he died of fentanyl and he didn't die because a police officer had his knee on his neck. Okay? I mean, that's the only thing I can come up with. And when you watch the tape and you see, does this guy look like he's a violent guy in the car? He's saying, basically, look, I don't want any problems. I mean, what else is the guy saying? We can go back and look at the clip over and over and over. It's not a guy that's swearing at the police, that's trying to swing at him, that's trying to do everything else. And let's not forget, this man was arrested for passing a $20 counterfeit bill. Okay? If someone came to your car and opened up and said, roll down the window, please, well, can you get out of the car? We're gonna arrest you for a currency violation. You'd be saying, what the hell are you talking about? But the problem here is simply this. When I watched that tape, and again, I don't have any problem with Tucker Carlson as a news reporter. He's definitely a qualified guy. He's got a big-time show. But to put that crap on television and to cover it in the manner that he covered it is really disgusting, not only to me, but I think the vast majority of people that are in the center that are trying to just try to understand this. Let me also tell everybody something. George Floyd didn't create the problem that Tucker Carlson talks about, his death. These people were standing on the sidelines. It could have been anything, okay? You don't even hear about Tucker Carlson anymore. You don't hear George Floyd anymore. You don't even hear about it, okay? These are people and anarchists and people that hate our country that were standing in a football three-point stance waiting for something in our country to happen. This isn't about George Floyd. You know, this man should not have been murdered at the hands of the police. I don't care what Tucker Carlson shows on his show. Like, that tape is now going to change the minds. And then they put the fentanyl on the bottom of the screen, and he could have died with 3 times less than that, and that's why he choked. This is a joke, okay? This is a complete play on ideology because these people are paid to spew this. That's the reason we do this show. But, you know, as Tucker Carlson said, you make up your own mind. Well, all the people of the 2B Frank show, you make up your own mind. But this man didn't deserve to die, and he's certainly not the reason that all of these cities have been in chaos since his death. This has been pent up in our country. This has been out there. And George Floyd was a reason why people have now done what they've done. So, you know, I didn't like that segment that he played. I thought it was terrible. And I've seen some really terrible stuff on the George Floyd killing which is racist and everything else. I'm not saying that Tucker Carlson's a racist. I'm saying that I've seen a lot of stuff that is incredibly racist as it relates to this man's death. Again, he was getting arrested for a counterfeit $20 bill. Let's just all keep that in perspective. Okay, the second segment is about U.S. satisfaction. All right, whatever the hell that means. U.S. satisfaction in the United States of America is at a 9-year low. Well, I don't think you have to be a Phi Beta Kappa to figure that one out. I mean, people are locked up in their homes. Nobody can really travel. People are out of work. All because, really and truly, of a virus that we didn't start. It all started in Wuhan, China. And anybody who doesn't like that, just check out the facts, okay? And I'm not taking a political position for Trump, against Trump. We don't do that. But it started in China, okay? There's no denying this. And it comes to the United States, and quite frankly, as I've said over and over and over and over on this show, the Trump administration did not, A, take it seriously in the beginning, and B, I don't think they handled it the way that maybe it should have been handled, okay? Very simple. You know, he handles the coronavirus, he goes down 12 points in the polls. As I mentioned on this show, there's a direct correlation between the coronavirus and Joe Biden in the basement being ahead of Donald Trump in all the polls in the United States. Roll the clip.
In school learning. We've seen the worry generally at the national level of contracting the virus really come back up again. In May, 46% of Americans said that they were basically concerned that they or their children would contract it. That's now up to 64%, kind of through the end of July. Concerns about the virus pretty much on every level have been on the decline again. And a lot of our data look a lot more like the data we were collecting in May and April, as opposed to sort of the middle of the peak where things kind of seem to calm down. This all happens, of course, in the background of some pretty concerning data just on how things are going in the country overall. We also mentioned this week on our news page that 13% of Americans are satisfied with the way things are going in the U.S. That's a 9-year low for the country. We saw the most dramatic drop.
13%?
Yes, 13% of Americans are satisfied with the way things are going in the country. It's actually been below 50% for a very long time. But as you can imagine, and the graph is pretty dramatic, since the virus really took us into lockdown, it's only tanked dramatically.
All right, so I don't know this guy at all. I don't know his political spin. I don't care about his political spin. He's given statistics out of a Gallup poll from July 1st to July 23rd, that ultimately 13% of Americans are happy with where we are in the country, okay? It's all coronavirus related, 90% of it. You know, maybe the Black Lives Movement has some impact on it, but this is coronavirus related, all right? So you take a look at this and you say to yourself, okay, so what about before the pandemic? Well, here's what this guy didn't really want to talk about, okay? Before the pandemic, people were on a 15-year high based on employment, based on wages, based on the way things were going in the United States. Before the virus, okay? People were at a 15-year high that everything was going great. So this is what we talk about. This is the issue that we deal with here, okay? This pandemic has been the worst scenario that I've seen in my lifetime, okay? The only other one you can go back to, and it's not my lifetime, you go back to World War I and II, and then you go back to the pandemic 100 years ago. I mean, this thing has turned our country and, quite frankly, our world upside down. But what a lot of the political people don't want to do is give you the full story. Yes, things are at a 9-year low in terms of people's satisfaction because there is no satisfaction. Can't go out, you worry about going to restaurants, you got the whole thing, okay? Chinese virus. Sorry, that's what we call it on this show. All right? It is what it is. That's not a political comment. I'm not backing Trump on that. It's obvious. But here's the deal. What a lot of these political pundits don't want to tell you is before the pandemic occurred, we were at a 15-year high in satisfaction. What does that tell us? That tells us that things can turn like a light switch. That's what it tells me. It's amazing when you take a look at what can happen and how things can turn literally on a dime. But you got to give both sides of that satisfaction argument, and that's what we're trying to do. But things as of today, the satisfaction in the United States is not good. Why would it be? All right. Segment 3, the Washington Post. You know, this is all, again, a big part of what we talk about on this show over and over and over and over. A biased media for their own purposes. And again, I'm going to start calling it out. These people are making an enormous amount of money in following the ideology of whatever their employer is telling them to do. Now, again, I think these people also believe in the ideology, a lot of them, because, quite frankly, you really couldn't even pull it off if you didn't have a gut feel for the whole scenario. But the Washington Post, I mean, this is kind of, this is the kind of stuff that it just bothers you. They published a glowing piece praising China's Communist Party, and you just got to wonder, that has nothing to do with anything other than it's contrary to the views of the Trump administration. Now, I've taken a hard line on China, and I will as long as I do this show. I don't think that they like Americans. I don't think they like our lifestyle. I don't think they like the way we live. They've stolen a lot of our intellectual properties. I mean, these are facts that are undeniable. But because the Trump administration has taken a hard line now after he took a very soft line. I mean, he went on TV and, President Xi and I are good friends. You're not good friends with this guy. Said that already. They're not going to be friends with anybody. They don't care about that. They want to steal our stuff. They want to surpass us as the world superpower. Now, as long as we don't self-destruct, that will never happen. I don't believe it'll ever happen because they don't even know how to invent anything. They just steal stuff and then they copy it. But the fact of the matter is, where the Washington Post praises the communist Chinese regime, that can be nothing except a bunch of political garbage. Roll the tape.
Gordon, I think we can acknowledge that there is now a new Cold War in progress, but are we going to take it a step further? Is there any possibility or likelihood of a military clash in the near future?
There's always that possibility, Stuart. You have Chinese general officers and some civilians just want to kill. They've got a bloodlust. And they were successful on the night of June 15th in the Himalayas, where they, in a premeditated act, killed 20 Indian soldiers. Also, we've seen these very disturbing boat bumping and other incidents in China's peripheral waters against 6 other nations, the constant threats to invade Taiwan, and the increased tempo of dangerous intercepts of the U.S. Navy in the global commons. When a militant power wants to kill in great numbers, it usually succeeds.
So this article from the Washington Post, not that interview, but the article from the Washington Post talked about how the people of China now have really come around on the government because, quote unquote, they've seen the mess in the United States. Let me try to explain it to you this way again. Journalists were thrown out of China when the pandemic broke because the Chinese tried to make sure that none of the real facts got out in the world press. Number 2, they jailed scientists that were calling the government out because of the Wuhan virus. Okay? These are not people that care about human rights. Look at what's going on in China. There's reports everywhere that they have concentration camps in the country, okay? They've got the lowest standard of human rights almost on the planet. Look at what they did in Hong Kong, Take a look at that. I mean, none of that is even deniable, or you can't even argue about it. But the Washington Post, for political reasons, I remember when I was a young businessman, the Washington Post was one of the most important newspapers in the country. Now, it's owned by Jeffrey Bezos, the founder and president of Amazon. Now, is there any connection to any of this? I'm not going to make a connection here, because if you do your homework, which our show does, you'll find out that Bezos is getting his ass kicked inside China. He's going to now try to figure out how he sells from outside of China into China. But his actual in-China activities have not gone well. There's stiff competition, and to be honest with you, that's the Chinese government. They're not going to let an American company come in and do what the hell they want. They're not like us, okay? We let companies come in, and it's fair play. So the Washington Post article is important enough to bring up as a segment on this show, because it indicates, again, this canyon-wide divide in our politics, and the press has chosen sides. It's like a pickup basketball game. We've chosen sides now, and you got people on one side and you got people on the other side. So you just can't really believe what you read anymore, and that's the sad part. And that's why we bring it up. Okay, segment 4 is the segment on Ted Cruz and Antifa. If you've watched the press on this, there was a hearing in Ted Cruz's committee, and he talked about Antifa. And Mazie Hirono, who is the senator from Hawaii, one of the senators from Hawaii, she's a nut job, okay? There's no other way for this show to really categorize her, okay? She is so left-wing, she is literally off the pier. And again, I'm not against left-wing, right-wing. I'd like for people to be right here. But she's so far off the map, you know, you can't even find her on the map. And she gets into it with Cruz, and she walks out of the hearing, and she doesn't want to really call Antifa. Now, what she does do, we have to give her a due. She does say that nonviolent protests are the name of the game, that you can't back violence, okay? There's nothing else for anybody to say. I mean, you can't back violence. But Antifa is a really bad organization from the standpoint that they are sometimes nonviolent, but a lot of times they are violent. Roll the tape.
So I hope this is the end of this hearing, Mr. Chairman, and that we don't have to listen to any more of your rhetorical speeches. Thank you very much. I'm leaving.
Well, I appreciate the, as always, kind and uplifting words of Senator Hirono.
Thank you.
And I would also note that throughout her remarks, she still did not say a negative word about Antifa, nor has any Democrat here. They instead engage in a political game where they depend. You're welcome to say something negative about Antifa right now.
I think that I've covered the subject quite well. You are not listening.
Okay, she declined to speak, so that is the position of the Democratic Party. I would note also that of the 7 Democratic senators who spoke, not a one of them apologized for or denounced multiple Democrats calling law enforcement officers Nazis, stormtroopers, and Gestapo, to be fair. I don't have...
Now, if I was Senator Hirono and I could go to Wailea in Maui or sit there with Ted Cruz, I'd go to Wailea. I would have gotten up too, all right? Now, obviously, I'm making light of that. But the Antifa scenario is a bad one, okay? We have every single show talked about the First Amendment, the constitutional rights of people to peacefully protest. Antifa is not a peaceful organization. Let me give you the definition as written. Antifa is an anti-fascist political group whose objectives are to achieve their objectives both nonviolently and violently if necessary. Okay? This is all in their charter. Now, the problem is nobody can find out who the hell runs this organization. It is really an underground scenario. But there are many people that in these peaceful protests, the way that they started out over the George Floyd death, wrongful death, that Antifa was a part of the violent part of those protests, that their influence got infiltrated. And see, that's the thing, again, that Tucker Carlson and a lot of these people really miss. This wasn't about George Floyd's death. This was about entities like Antifa that hate our country, that want to change our country, that want to basically do the things necessary to create upheaval in our country. This is what this is about. And so I think when you really take a look at it, you know, I mean, Ted Cruz is a nice guy. You know, he's very conservative. I mean, you want to talk about North Pole, South Pole. You could take Senator Arano and Ted Cruz, and I mean, you're talking about a canyon-wide divide where you can't even see the other side. But when you really look at it, again, and we're going to talk to Dr. Lacefield about this, this is how our elected officials are acting. How do you expect the rest of the country to act? Okay. And then our fifth and last segment is a segment on Chicago public schools starting the year virtually. Okay? They're going to start the year with virtual learning. Now, do I have a problem with that or not have a problem with that? I see both sides of it. Now, we had a guest on the show from the Dallas Moms Group that ultimately said that there's no coordination between all of the teachers and the parents and the students on telelearning, that it was really a mixed bag. If we're going to go to a virtual environment to try to keep our kids safe, and I understand both sides of the argument. If I have younger kids like I did at one point in my life, I'd have a hard time sending them to school until I actually saw the actual plan about how you're going to keep them safe, okay? Now, a lot of the Chicago issue comes from their teachers' union. The teachers' union is basically saying that they might strike if, in fact, they open the schools, okay? Because the teachers feel like they're at risk. They're older. You know, there's issues there. I think that they're questioning the safety requirements of what's going to be imposed in the schools. And so I think there's a lot of broader issues. The Donald, and I call him the Donald, do every show, watches the show from secretly. You know, he doesn't tell anybody, but he watches the show from the Oval Office. Made a big mistake, I think, when he started talking about the defunding of schools that didn't open. That was a big mistake. You just can't go there. Roll the tape.
4 parents, 1 Central Phoenix school district. Lots of questions and confusion about when it's safe for their kids to return to school.
In this information environment, how difficult is it for parents to make a decision?
It's very difficult.
Sean Green quit his job in June to stay home with his 2 kids. His son is asthmatic and has a suppressed immune system.
They don't catch it easily, they don't bring it home easily, and if they do catch it, they get better fast.
The reality, some kids get very sick from the coronavirus.
I believe that he can definitely get it, and I do believe that he can transmit it.
And do you think it could endanger his life?
It absolutely could. My son has been hospitalized repeatedly on just normal asthma attacks.
There is no choice. I have to work.
Single mom Kai Weber has 3 kids and needs to work. She'd like in-person school to start as soon as possible, but
How tough is it to make decisions about how you're supposed to educate your kids and keep them safe?
It's terrible. Like, I don't know day to day. You can't plan anything.
So, you know, you sit back, and these are real concerned, you know, parents, and they're concerned people. You know, there isn't a right or wrong answer here, as I can see it as the host of this show. What I do see is I see the politics again coming out loud and clear, that one side of the equation is anti-opening the schools because Donald Trump says open them. There's another side that backs Trump that says open the schools. You know, you got to open the schools. The kids got to go to school because they back Trump. Everything in our country is becoming and has become and will be political for the near future. That's what we see here. And when we start using our children and their schooling as pawns in this game, that's where it becomes an issue for me. Chicago has had their share of problems. We cover it almost every show, okay? But I'm not going to be against their virtual learning program for the first period of this. I mean, to be honest with you, again, I said as a parent, if I had young kids or I had grandkids that were ready to go to school, I would be concerned about policies and procedures based on what I've seen thus far, out of our elected officials. So we're going to keep an eye on this one, and we'll figure out exactly, where this sits. Okay, our guest today, again, is Dr. Gary Lacefield, and we're going to bring him on now. We're going to talk about a lot of what we talked about in the monologue. Dr. Lacefield, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Well, you look good. You're down in beautiful Burleson, Texas. So
yes, sir.
For those of the world audience that doesn't know where Burleson is, it's outside of Fort Worth, Texas, and it's a pretty quiet little community down there. So people really like being down there. I've been down there several times. It's kind of a fun place. Dr. Lacefield, why don't you, because I would never be able to explain all that you do, but why don't you talk about what you've done in your career and how it relates to what's going on in our country today?
Okay. It is kind of hard to narrow down all the stuff I've done most of my life. To narrow 38 years down, I spent 13 years teaching in the graduate program at Dallas Baptist University, teaching mediation, conflict resolution courses that I developed. I spent 13 years at University of Texas, Arlington, doing pretty much the same thing. And then I ended up, my last 5 years was with Carlson State University, that's part of the Texas A&M system. And the reason that's important is because I was the director at Carlson State of the Institute for Mediation, Arbitration, Legal Studies, and White Collar Forensics. And I was the director, the initial director, and was director for 5 years. So most of my background has been either in compliance, which I was the compliance officer for Syntex Corporation, CTX, a couple of very large mortgage companies, Fortune 100 mortgage company. And so I've either been in compliance on the regulatory side, because I also spent 10 years with HUD as a supervisor of all lending investigations and senior civil rights analyst. And so being able to see it from both sides, seeing it from the regulatory side and from the industry side, I've gotten a pretty good understanding. I don't always agree, but a pretty good understanding of both sides. And with the overall focus of everything, whether it's compliance, education, and so forth, with conflict resolution and resolving conflicts. And that seems to be been a niche that I've been involved in my entire life. And the number one thing that we're not doing, that the world's not doing, is we're not listening. We're not listening. We're reacting. We're doing things without listening, processing what needs to be done, not prejudging people, and moving on from there. But with the focus on conflict resolution and mediation, for example, the summer before last, the summer of 2019, we met with myself and several local ministers, met with the chief of police, Fort Worth. And in that meeting, he said, how can we get our community police officers more involved with the community? And I said, one of the best ways to get that involvement is to train each other side by side. So that's what we did. I set up a training between the Fort Worth Police Department and community leaders. We had about 38 participants, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you get that many police officers and community leaders sequestered in a room for 40 hours, Now, of course, that sounds worse than it was. It was done over. Uh, we did it on Wednesday nights. We did it for 10 Wednesday nights in a row. And just to give you an idea, I put 2 police officers and 2 community leaders at the same table. And so we had all these tables around. And every table was represented by community leaders, which were the community leaders were identified as heads of churches. We actually had the Dallas NAACP representative there taking the training as well. Uh, but but the interesting thing, and it's just like the rest of the real world, it's just like teaching a brand new class. Class 1, you had all the community leaders sitting on one side of the room and all the police officers, law enforcement sitting on the other side of the room. And so the very first thing I did was I divided that up, put them at their, put their place settings where there was equal number of community leaders and police officers at the same table. If you recorded the views and attitudes of the people from the first night of the training, there was distrust. That people they had no patience. They weren't listening to each other. It was just like having Democrats on one side and Republicans on one side. And once again, we're not trying to make this political, but there was that big a divide. On the second night of training, it all came together. And by the last night of training, which was the 10th night, which culminated in the 40 hours, you would have thought that they all came from the same family, that the community leaders and the police officers had been lifelong buddies. Now I know that's not going to happen in every situation, but
yeah,
that's a good example.
Here's the thing that I think that people are really concerned about in the country, and I'll try to really draw this up, and then you can comment on this. Donald Trump comes out of the business world, and he's going to quote unquote drain the swamp. Okay? Well, that immediately is in conflict with the establishment in Washington. But he's going to come in and he's going to drain the swamp. Okay, out of nowhere, the guy wins. And from the time that he wins to now, all they wanted to do was try to get rid of him, which I felt was completely wrong. That's not political. It's a fact. You have the FBI investigations, and you've got James Comey, and you've got all this big mess. So for the whole time that the guy's president, all he's been involved in is conflict trying to get him out of office, a duly elected president. Okay? Barack Obama, I voted for him the first time. He was duly elected twice. That's our whole system. But now you get into a situation where him and Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they can't even sit in the same room anymore. So there is no get together. There is no let's sit down and let's try to figure this out. They don't want to figure it out. If Trump goes left, they're going right. Very simple. Doesn't even matter if it's logical. So the issue now becomes, though, the situation, if Trump gets reelected, he's going to go through 4 more years of this. Our country's going to go through 4 more years of this. It's not going to change. If Joe Biden gets elected, are the Republicans now going to retaliate and say, you put Trump's administration through hell for no reason? He was duly elected. And so therefore, we're gonna put Biden through it. I don't see in today's political world, they act like children. Okay? These elected officials act like children. But I don't see that there's any conflict resolution, at least from where I sit. And you say?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's just like the clip that you had of the good senator from Hawaii. It was a while back. She came out and said, men should just shut up. Men should be quiet. Men shouldn't say anything. Well, that certainly is not going to lead people to want to work things out. Especially, I was personally offended because I've always taken up the side of what I think is right. I've got 2 daughters. I've got 4 kids, 9 grandkids, and 2 great grandchildren, daughters. And it's the way the politicians talk and represent it's almost like they're representing themselves and their own attitudes as opposed to what the people want.
Not to interrupt you, but that is the crux of everything that I've spoken about on this show. They're representing themselves. They're not representing their constituency. And let's assume that Senator Hirano, she has a very liberal group that she represents out in Hawaii. Okay?
Right.
I understand that. That's okay. That's what the country's all about. Single member districts, right? That's how the whole thing works. But she's not really representing anybody because the people of Hawaii, I guarantee to you, don't want to watch this conflict and this situation that's going on. And they think on the liberal side of the equation, they get rid of Trump, all their problems are solved. I got news for you. That's not going to work that way. And again, if Biden wins, he deserves to win. He wins the Electoral College vote, and he wins, and that's our system. And if he wins, we've got to respect him as the president of the United States. But I can tell you that Trump coming out of nowhere with his rhetoric, and Trump becomes, Dr. Lacefield, I hate to say it, but he becomes his own worst enemy sometimes. And he's done a lot of good things. And I've said it on the show. Economically, he's done a lot of good things. He really has. But he becomes his own worst enemy. Let me ask you a question. How big is the coronavirus scenario in the country right now as it relates to where you see the politics of that? Is it the biggest issue that we're going to deal with for a long time?
Until the election, yes, I think it's definitely the biggest issue. The problem is that what is the right thing to do? I know at the beginning of your show you mentioned that we could have done things faster. Absolutely, we could. But once again, when as you and I were growing up, I mean, we're probably relatively about the same age. You respect the position, not so much the person. If you were oh my God, if you were a senator in the United States, if you were the president of the United States, you respected that position. And if someone earned the ability to get into that position, then you respected them simply based upon that title that they have, that they've earned. And it starts with respect. It also goes to, when are we going to get back to friendly debate? You and I can be 100% polar opposites, which we're not, but you and I can have an intelligent conversation about any topic without rioting, looting, and doing whatever.
Yeah. Well, the politics have gotten so bad, and the media. The reason that I do this show, Dr. Lacefield, is that I couldn't watch cable television and the news channels anymore. I just couldn't watch them. They were so biased and so politically based that you really can't get any information, how a story could be so different from two networks. I'm not even going to name the networks, but we all know what they are. How a story could be so different. It's just impossible from a journalistic standpoint. And so, we get ourselves into this and we get into these situations. Let me ask you this. So after the election, and let's assume, we're going to go through two scenarios. Let's assume Donald Trump wins. Okay, let's say he's behind in the polls. Let's say he somehow wins. Are we going to see another 4 years of what we've just been through? Is that your view of the world from what you see as a conflict guy?
If the Republicans don't take the House, because all the investigations originate, or most of the investigations originate from the House side, and so with Nancy Pelosi's group, once again, she's never. If Donald Trump said it was daylight, she'd say it's night, and vice versa. So they're at polar opposites of that.
So if the House stays in Democratic control, which it certainly looks like, I'll tell you, there are people that I talk to that are worried about the Senate. They're worried about the Republican control of the Senate. And so there's a lot going on in Washington. Now, what about if Biden wins? Let's just assume now Joe Biden's the president. What happens?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is hide my guns.
All right, but that's all right. I got it. But that's
there,
political. We're going to stay away
there's
from
several.
that.
Right. So if once again, I think everything about the presidency and what's going to happen there in the future is going to boil down to what happens in the House and the Senate. And you're absolutely right. The Senate is very close. But once again, the House it's what's going to take place with the House and the Senate. You know, as a person that's been in the business world and education pretty much all my life, you know, it is amazing the things that have been accomplished with all of this conflict going on. Imagine if we didn't have all the investigations going on. Imagine if we could talk to each other without, you know, throwing each other in the fire.
All right. Well, Dr. Lacewell, we really appreciate your insight. Clearly, you've been involved with conflict resolution for a long time. And, you know, I think that your views are well educated. How do people follow you or get a hold of you? How does our audience get to contact you?
The easiest way is just my first name, Gary, Gary, at riskmitigation.net. That's
okay.
riskmitigation.net.
All right. Well, I got some friends, doctor, that could use your conflict resolution with their wives. I'm not one of them, but you know, I got some friends out there, you know, that could use some conflict resolution. So we appreciate you being on the show. Thanks so much for your time, and stay safe.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So to kind of wrap this up, you know, we're really in a situation to where it's never hopeless, but we're in a situation in this country where things are really upside down. I've never seen them like this. And I think that Americans, right, are the internal optimists. You know, we believe that the future is going to be better than the past. I certainly hope so for my children and my grandchildren and the young people of this country. I hope that things can find a way to work themselves out. I think that when you really look at this from a Donald Trump perspective, he's got on one side every reason in the world to feel like that as a duly elected president, they've tried to get rid of him since the beginning. I mean, from the inauguration. That's kind of on the Trump side. On the other side, I think that the old adage really applies. You live by the sword and you die by the sword. And I think that Donald could have taken a better tact about things, about how he deals with people, about how he talks to people. And I get comments on the show that I'm picking on Trump or I'm picking on Biden. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm trying to point out the obvious here. And the obvious is it takes two to tango, okay? You have to have two. And in order to get these problems resolved, I think that Dr. Lacefield's point was very well taken, is that the politicians, as people view this around the country, are representing themselves. They're not even representing their constituency anymore. So that is a big issue as we go forward. In closing, again, I would say that as Americans, we've got to figure out how to get here. If we can get here and we can have open dialogue and we can have discussions about important issues. You know what I would have loved? I would have loved to be sitting at home and watching the President of the United States working with the Congress of the United States to solve the coronavirus pandemic as quickly and as efficiently as possible. But what did we get? We didn't get that. On one hand, we had, you know, Donald in the beginning dismissing this, which he shouldn't have done. But then on the other side, you got people that are just shooting at him like he caused it, like he did it. And all it does is create, again, this canyon-wide gap that we talk about and we deal with over and over and over. So we're going to move forward on these topics as the shows continue. We're going to try to find the middle ground of what we're dealing with. When I see something like what I saw with Tucker Carlson, I'm going to call it out because I think that it is gaslighting at the highest levels of just trying to take a situation and make it look like something that, quite frankly, it wasn't. And so we're going to take those positions on this show, and we're going to do the best we can just to try to get the facts out. So in closing, I'm Frank Zaccanelli. I'm happy to be your host of the show. Thank you very much for watching today, and we'll be back with you on Monday. If you want to follow our show, which our followers have grown tremendously, follow us at the 2B Frank Show YouTube, the 2B Frank Show Twitter, the 2B Frank Show LinkedIn, the 2B Frank Show Facebook, and the 2bfrankshow.com is where the show is posted for all of us that are not computer friendly, if you will. So until Monday, please stay safe with your families, and we'll see you on Monday, and everybody have a great weekend.